Wonderful. So now we're going to talk about a version of this model where people choose both what social categories to place themselves in, right, how to identify, and also what decisions to take, right, what actions to take when those actions have different prescriptions, right, different social implications based on the category that they belong to. And we're going to use this model to try to understand a phenomenon that's observed in a lot of environments that's really important for intergenerational mobility. So what this phenomenon is that in a wide variety of contexts, people who are economically or socially marginalized in various ways tend to have different reactions to power, right? So if we think about schools, which is where a lot of the ethnographic research is done, you might have in working class communities or racially marginalized communities, right? You might have some students at a school who identify with the teachers, right, and try to follow the rules and in some ways do what's expected of them by the dominant society. And you'll have other students who do the opposite, right, who react against school authority, do things that they're not expected or not supposed to do, right? So in the paper they gave a couple different examples from various ethnographies, right? I believe in working class England, they said you've got students who are called the ear holes, who sat and listened to the teacher, did what the teacher said, expected rules to be followed. And you had the lads, right, who tried to disrupt class, right, like to go get drunk in the middle of the day and then come back and mess things up, right, essentially were in opposition to school's authority, right? You have the same thing in, in Akerlof's paper that we read, right, this distinction between the college boys who were trying to, do well in school and go to college, leave their neighborhood in Boston, versus the corner boys, right, who were essentially separating themselves from those sorts of ambitions, right? So Akerlof and Cranton think about this with the idea that people can take either a conformist identity, right, where they conform to the dominant culture or dominant culture's expectations, or an oppositional identity, right, where they define themselves as separate from the dominant culture and refuse to do things that the dominant culture wants them to do, right? And they describe this as greens versus reds, right? So green is conform to dominant identity, right, / power structures, and reds are oppositional, right? Now, Akerlof and Cranton think about situations where there are clear personal benefits to identifying with the green identity and doing the types of things that greens are expected to do, right? In other words, we might think that in terms of increasing your personal income, right, increasing your standing, I shouldn't say your standing as a society, increasing your income, increasing the comfort with which you're going to live your life, sitting quietly in school and paying attention is going to get you further, it's going to help you more than getting drunk in the middle of the day and pulling your teacher's pants down, right? And so they basically ask the question, why might we see significant numbers of people choosing a red identity rather than a green identity? And how does this choice of identity influence people's later decisions about what to do? I want to point out before we dive into this, right, Akerlof and Cranton talk about this in the sense of, the green identity is clearly better for individuals. We're trying to understand why people choose to engage in self-destructive behavior. But we can use this model to think about all sorts of situations where either that's still reasonably true, but where we think that a red identity is in some way the proper or encouraged choice of identity, right? There's plenty of situations where we would hope that people would pay personal costs not to conform to a power structure. There's also plenty of circumstances where choosing the dominant identity might involve personal costs, right? For example, choosing not to take bribes might have social benefits if you're part of a dominant identity, but have personal costs, right? You miss out on the bribes. So this is just one of many versions of this model that we could be thinking about. Okay, so their explanation for this, right, for why people might choose the red identity, is essentially that if we think again about prescriptions characteristics, we might think that people from marginalized communities have characteristics, right, intrinsic parts of themselves that are prescribed against in the green identity. In other words, people in the dominant culture might say something like, I'm never fully going to accept someone who speaks with a working class accent, right? Or I'm never going to fully expect someone who is a member of a racial minority group. I'm never going to fully accept someone who's a woman, right? If that's the case, people who have those prescribed characteristics, right? Someone who does speak with a working class accent, or is a member of a racial minority group, or is a woman, is going to have to deal with, if they choose the green identity, right, this sense of displacement out of the set of characteristics they're trying to conform to, right? They're going to suffer a personal cost, a psychic cost, and practical costs, right, of being constantly marginalized or put down among the people that they're trying to live with, right? Choosing a red identity, choosing an oppositional identity, might be a way of escaping those negative costs, right? Those negative consequences of trying to conform to an identity that doesn't fully include you, doesn't fully want you. So we can say that being green has a psychic cost we'll call R, right? That comes from the fact that you're part of a marginalized community, not fully included in greens. But it's also going to allow you to engage in behaviors that have personal benefits to you V. So to think through this concretely, let's think of a simple situation, right? Let's imagine that you and your best friend are both part of a marginalized community, right? Are high school seniors and are deciding whether or not to wear suits on career day, right? So you've got two choices. Do you wear a suit or a t-shirt on career day? Right? When we'll imagine that various people are coming to do job interviews, wearing a suit is going to help you. So wearing a suit has a benefit, a personal benefit V, and wearing a t-shirt has a benefit of 0, right? You're not going to get a job wearing a t-shirt. So the reason that not everyone's going to wear a suit is that you're also going to choose red or green identity. Right? Green, prescription is wear suit. So greens who wear t-shirts pay a psychic cost, IS, right? You feel an internal conflict with the fact that your behavior doesn't match your identity given by IS. The red prescription is to wear the t-shirt, right? Not to engage in this charade. And similarly, red suit wearers on top of this, right? Plus we've got that greens pay a psychic cost of R. Right, on top of all this, you're also going to suffer a psychic cost from choosing a different identity than your friend, right? Which we'll call IO, right? Just like the last example. So as you're making this decision, right, you're essentially deciding, do I choose green or red? And then after I choose my identity, do I choose suit or t-shirt? You're going to make that decision on the basis of the career benefits of each decision, the basis of the psychic costs or benefits associated with the combination of your choice and your identity, and based on trying to match your identity with the identity choice of your friend. Right? You're going to feel bad if you decide that you're an establishment type, right, trying to do well and trying to build a career, and your friend decides that they're anti-establishment. You guys are going to fight. Same thing if the opposite is true. So what we're going to do is we're going to construct a simple two-player game to try to think through what the social equilibria are going to be on the basis of these different parameters. Okay, so I've magically pushed all of these definitions over to the corner, and I've written this problem out as a two-player game where each player has 4 choices, right? Where those 4 choices are combinations of social categories and clothing choices, right, and actions. And just to make sure we're clear, right, the reason I'm writing this as a two-player game is because my payoffs depend on my own choices, but they also depend on the social category that my friend chooses, right? Because I'm going to suffer a cost if our categories don't match. The same thing is going to be true of my friend. I'm also going to be exploring a version of this problem where I get a benefit V, or you get a benefit V from wearing a suit, right? Because you'll be employed if you wear a suit, but your friend doesn't, right? They get a benefit of 0. We could imagine that they've got different grades or some other reason that they're not going to get hired even if they do wear a suit, right? So you guys aren't going to be identical. Okay, so let's try to figure out, so in order to figure out what you're going to do, what we need to do is figure out the payoffs you're going to get in each of the 16 possibilities here, right? And then we're going to need to figure out what your best choice is based on your friend's best choices, your friend's choices, what your friend's best choice is based on your choices. This makes sense? And just to make sure, right, in case it's been a little while since you've seen a grid like this, the idea here is that these 4 represent your choices, those 4 represent your friend's choices, the lower triangles here are going to have your payoffs from the choices, the upper triangles are going to have your friend's payoffs. So let's figure out your payoffs by first imagining that your friend chooses green. Right? And it's worth noting, right, if your friend is green, it's not going to matter at all for your well-being if they wear a suit or a t-shirt. Right? You only care about matching their identity. You don't care about matching their behavior. Cool. So in that case, let's think about what your payoff would be of choosing the green identity and a green t-shirt. So if I choose to wear a green t-shirt, I'm essentially going to get a payoff that's dependent on 4 things, right? My career benefit, my direct benefit from my identity, right? The benefit or cost of violating prescriptions, and the social consequences, right? How my friend's going to feel about me. So in this case, what's the career benefit of wearing a t-shirt? 0, right? I'm not going to get a job wearing a t-shirt. I'm green, so I'm going to pay an identity cost of -R. I'm going to violate the prescriptions of my identity, right? Green people are supposed to wear suits. That's going to be -IS. But at least me and my friend match, so I'm going to have a social benefit of 0, right? So my total payoff here is going to be -R minus IS. -R minus IS. This makes sense? Cool. How about if instead I wore a green suit? Well, in this case, I'm going to have a career benefit of V, right? I am going to get a job wearing a suit. I still suffer an identity cost of -R. I'm not violating any prescriptions, right? Greens are supposed to wear suits. And again, my friend and I are getting along just fine, right? So as long as I'm wearing a green suit, as long as my friend's in green, my payoff is going to be V minus R. Make sense? Now how about if I was red, right? Let's think first about red T. Well, if I'm red, choose a red identity, wearing a t-shirt, not going to get hired, right? Career of 0. No identity cost, right? I'm not having to fit in with a dominant culture that's not accepting of me. I am not violating the prescriptions of my identity, right? Because reds are supposed to wear t-shirts, but I am going to pay a social cost of -IO because I don't match with my friend, right? So my payoff from wearing a red tee is going to be -IO in both cases, right? Whether my friend wears a suit or a t-shirt. And then lastly, right, I can think about a red suit. If I wear a red suit, I am going to get hired, right? Employers don't care about my identity, they care about my behavior, right? So I am going to get a V here, a payoff of V. I'm not going to suffer a cost to my identity, right? I'm still in my soul a red, so I'm not going to deal with the cost of trying to conform to an identity that I don't share, but I'm going to pay a prescription cost IS, right? Because reds aren't supposed to wear suits. So I'm going to feel discomfort attached with the fact that I'm not behaving the way people with my set of values or identity are supposed to behave. And then I'm also going to pay a social cost minus IO because of the fact that my friend's a green and I'm choosing a red, right? We've got different identities we're going to clash. So my overall payoff from being a red in a suit is going to be V minus IS minus IO, right? V minus IS minus IO. This all makes sense? So just to pause for a minute here, right, what this is telling me is that if I knew my friend was green, and I was trying to think about which of these is going to be better, it's of course going to depend on a number of things, right? It's going to depend on how big V is, right? If there's really, really huge benefits from getting a job, I'm probably going to be willing to suffer a lot of penalties in order to do so, in order to wear a suit. It's also going to depend on how much social pressure there is, right? In this case, IO is going to push me towards a green identity rather than a red identity. And it's going to depend on R relative to IS, right? Is it more uncomfortable to adopt a green identity and then conform to it? Or is it more uncomfortable to adopt a red identity and then not conform to my identity, right? Not do what I think that I ought to be doing based on my red identity. Okay, cool. So now to finish this off, right, I can do exactly the same thing, but now thinking about what my payoffs are going to be if my friend chose the red identity, right? So in this case, if I decided to go green tea, right, I'm going to get a career payoff of 0, right, no suit, identity payoff of negative IS, prescription, identity payoff of negative R, right, because I'm green, prescription payoff of negative IS, because I'm not doing what greens are supposed to do, and a social payoff of negative IO. This is just about the worst thing I could possibly choose to do, right? So if my friend is red, I'm going to get minus R, minus IS, minus IO. Right? If I wear a green suit, I am going to no longer suffer from a prescription violation, right? I'm doing what greens are supposed to do. I'm going to get my career benefit of V, but I still deal with the discomfort of not being fully included in the green identity. I still deal with the social discomfort of disagreeing with my friend, right? So I'm going to get V minus R minus IO, V minus R minus IO. Right? How about if instead I decided to be red, right, starting with red T? Well, in that case, I'm going to have no career benefit, no identity cost, no prescription violation, right, reds are supposed to wear Ts, and no social cost. I'm going to match my friend. So I'm going to just break even here, right, end up at 0. And then the last possibility is that I could choose to take the red identity but wear the suit anyway, right? In that case, I'm going to get positive V, right? I'm going to get the career benefits of wearing a suit. No identity cost, right? I get to have the red identity, but I'm going to violate the prescriptions, right? I'm going to get minus IS, and no social cost because my friend and I match, right? We're both red. So I'm going to end up at V minus IS, V minus IS. So this is all of my benefits, right? We can finish this thing off by thinking about my friend's payoffs, which instead of writing this out longhand, right, we're just going to note that the only difference between me and my friend is going to be that my friend doesn't get V, right? They get 0. So this is going to be minus IS. This is going to be 0, right? Just symmetrically. This is going to be minus R minus IO. This is going to be minus R minus IS minus IO, right? Here, we're going to have exactly the same thing, right? They only care about my identity, not my sartorial decisions, right? And then if I am in green, my friend is going to have symmetrically, right, minus IS minus IO, right? They're going to have minus IO, right? They're going to have minus R, and they're going to have minus R minus IS. Cool. Okay, and same thing here, right? Minus IS minus IO minus IO minus R minus I guess. Okay. So this is going to fully characterize the payoffs that both of us get from our possible decisions. So now that we've done all this work, let's take a minute to talk about what possible equilibria are going to emerge from this, right? What people might be able to do. The first thing that we can do right off the bat is we can actually rule out the possibility that anyone will ever choose green and then wear a t-shirt, right? And the reason is, in game theory terms, green in a t-shirt is strictly dominated by green in a suit. The reason for that, right, is that you lose this penalty IS from wearing a t-shirt once you've chosen green, right? It doesn't match your identity, and you don't get anything in return, right? R doesn't change, IO doesn't change. So no one's ever going to choose green T. We can rule this out right off the bat, which is why I strategically placed it at the bottom of the board, right? That's never going to happen. On top of that, we can also rule out that your friend is ever going to choose the red identity and then wear a suit for exactly the same reason, right? Wearing a suit when you have a red identity comes with identity cost IS, right? But because your friend isn't going to get a job after wearing a suit, it comes with no benefits whatsoever. So we can rule this one out as well, right? This leaves us essentially with 2 choices that your friend might make and 3 choices that you might make. To make this easier to see, I'm going to disappear the choices that we've been able to rule out. So to think about what should happen now, let's think about what your friend's best decision is going to be, right, out of their 2 remaining options, given each of the things that you might choose to do, right? Whether you're going to choose to wear red, or to choose the red identity, or choose the green identity. So let's say that you chose the green identity, right? You were going to wear a green suit, or be green and wear a suit. In this case, your friend has 2 choices. They can adopt the green identity and pay a penalty minus R, or they can adopt the red identity and pay a penalty minus IO, right? So if you wear green, right, your friend is going to be green only if, right, IO is greater than R, right? In other words, if IO is greater than R, then your friend says the discomfort of adopting a dominant identity that doesn't fit them, or that doesn't fully accept them, is less than the discomfort of choosing a different identity than their friend, right? If that's the case, they'll end up choosing the green identity and wearing the suit, even if it doesn't provide them with any external benefits at all, right? Even if it doesn't increase their hopes of getting a job. Okay. And of course, if the opposite's the case, then they're going to choose red, even if their friend chooses otherwise, right? Now, how about if you chose red? If you decided to either choose red in a t-shirt or red in a suit, your friend's choice is completely obvious, right? They would much rather be red in a t-shirt than green in a suit if they had to suffer both the costs of an identity that didn't fully accept them and the cost of disagreeing with their friend, right? So they'll choose red for sure if you choose red. Now, how about you? If you knew that your friend was going to choose green, right? Are you going to choose green in a suit? Are you going to choose red in a tee? Or are you going to choose red in a suit? Well, in this case, part of this is going to come down to is V greater than R, right? Let's say that V is greater than R. So that if left to your own devices, you would choose to take the green identity, right? In that case, you're going to choose green if your friend chooses green over the red tee. You're going to choose green over red in the suit, as long as R is also less than IS plus IO. Right? Which we know it's got to be because we've said that R is less than IO. Right? So we'll actually just say if V is greater than R. Friend green. Right? Your best choice is the green suit. Right? However, if your friend chooses red, things get a little bit more complicated, right? If your friend chooses red, you might end up choosing to stay with the green suit, right? As long as IO isn't high enough, right? The negative social consequences aren't high enough. You might choose the red tea. You might also choose the red suit, right? You'll choose green suit. Right? Then you'll choose green suit if V minus R minus IO is greater than 0 and R plus IO is less than IS, right? So we can rewrite this as V is greater than R plus IO, right? You'll choose the red suit if V is greater than IS and R plus IO is less than IS. Or I'm sorry, R plus IO is greater than IS. Right? In other words, you'll choose to take the red identity and wear a suit if the internal cost of acting counter to your identity is less than the cost of adopting an identity that doesn't accept you, plus losing access to your friend, right? Paying the social cost of your friend. So, let's imagine that we're in this case, right? Let's say that this is the situation we're in. What we might end up with is a situation where if your friend chooses red, you'll also choose red, but you'll wear the suit, right, while your friend won't. In that case, everyone adopts a red identity, we're at a stable equilibrium. If your friend chose green, you would also choose green, right? And you would end up wearing the suit. Okay, so now that we've done all this work, let's talk a little bit about what we can take away from this. So the first thing is, we might want to think about, given this model, what are the circumstances under which the person with career opportunities is going to take advantage of them, right? They're going to achieve this, this personal income of V, right? There's a couple things that we could think about. One is, right, they're more likely to choose this when R is smaller, right? We said that when V is greater than R, that's going to increase the likelihood that someone's going to adopt the green identity and therefore wear the suit. So reducing the degree to which people from marginalized backgrounds feel dislocated or unaccepted within a dominant identity is going to reduce the number of people who adopt oppositional identities, right? Allow more people to take advantage of the potential advantages of a dominant identity, right? That's one potential implication. Another implication is we can increase the likelihood that people take advantage of these options, right? Wear the suit by decreasing IS, right? In other words, instead of trying to get people not to adopt an oppositional identity, to change the prescriptions associated with an oppositional identity towards prescriptions that are more helpful for individuals, right? So we might say, no, continue to wear the suit, try to get jobs that will pay you a high income, but then, use your income to support the rest of your community that's more disadvantaged from you, right? That's the prescription placed on having an oppositional identity, right? If you change those prescriptions, you can potentially increase the likelihood that without adopting a dominant identity, people with opportunities will end up taking them, right? They won't engage in the behavior of choosing a teacher. The last thing that I want to point out here, and this is, I think, something really important, is that when we think about the early Chetty results, talking about the importance of neighborhood, we can see this very clearly, right? Your likelihood of adopting the green identity in this simple model is going to be higher when more of your friends are likely to adopt a green identity, right? So if you move to a community, a school, a neighborhood, where either people face a lower sense of dislocation from adopting the dominant identity, or have better career opportunities, you're more likely to adopt that green identity, even if you are in the position as your friend here, who doesn't get very large intrinsic benefits, right? So if we're going to measure mobility, or we're going to measure the quality of neighborhoods based purely on things like people's level of income or people's levels of education, we're going to say that a move by your friend from a predominantly red neighborhood to a predominantly green neighborhood is going to be beneficial for their mobility. It's going to increase their likelihood of adopting a green identity. It's less clear, though, in this model, that that's going to be to your friend's benefit, right? We can see in this model that even though there are circumstances where your friend would choose green over red, right, in order to conform to their social environment, They would still be happier if everyone adopted a red identity than with everyone adopting a green identity, right? So they might end up having increases in income and education and other traditional measures of mobility, but decreases in overall well-being, right? Decreases in mental health, decreases in senses of belonging. So I think that's a really important thing that I want to throw out there that this model helps us do. Okay, I've now talked your ear off way, way too long. I'm going to leave it there, and we're going to talk about more of the implications of these two models for next time.